I didn't realize I was still holding the ribbon until I looked down and saw it wound around my finger. Soft, pale blue. The same one I'd used to tie the quilt. It felt almost foolish, the way I kept it there, like a child gripping the edge of a blanket. But it was the only thing in my hands that didn't feel cold. My lap was empty, my plate untouched, and my chest felt tight. Not with anger, but that kind of hollow that comes when everyone's laughing, and none of it reaches you. In the kitchen, I heard a cork pop. Someone laughed. One of the girls, maybe Emma, was talking about a TikTok filter that turned her into a dancing elf. "You have to see it," she said between giggles. "Even Grandma would look cute." But no one called me in. No one asked if I wanted to see. I sat on the edge of the couch like an extra in a play I used to star in. I glanced at the floor. Wrapping paper curled at the edges. Bits of ribbon. My gift, the one I spent 3 seasons. Stitching was lying there, crumpled, folded, but clearly unclaimed. Like a grocery bag someone meant to take to Goodwill, but left behind. I heard someone whisper, "It's adorable," in a thrift store kind of way. A light laugh followed. Not cruel, not kind either. The kind that stings more because it's careless. Not deliberate. They didn't know I was still close enough to hear. But I did. I always do. People think you stop hearing things when you get old. But grief sharpens the ears. It makes you hear more than you should. Every sigh, every pause, every polite silence before someone changes the subject. I didn't flinch. I didn't say anything. I just sat. And something in me, something small and quiet, began to unspool. Like a spool of thread rolling across the floor, bouncing softly with every disappointment. Years of holidays, of baking, of crafting, of showing up with hands full and heart open, unraveling, knot by invisible knot. The fire crackled behind me, but the warmth didn't reach. The smell of spiced cider had dulled. The lights on the tree blinked like they'd grown tired of blinking. I curled the ribbon tighter in my fingers, not to hold it, but to hold me. The smell of cinnamon used to live in our house all December. It wasn't sprayed from a can or pumped through a candle. It came from the real thing, sticky, warm, sprinkled. On top of baked apples and rolled into soft sugar cookies, the kind you had to press with your thumb, just right. I remember how it clung to the curtains, not strong, just familiar. A scent you felt in your chest more than your nose. It mixed with the pine needles we tracked in from the front porch and the butter melting in the crusts I made from scratch. That was Christmas to me. Not noise, not wrapping paper, just a warm stove, 2 girls with sticky fingers, and the sound of wooden spoons clinking in glass bowls. "Can I lick the spoon, Mama?" they'd ask. Every year, every batch. It didn't matter that they already knew the answer, only if you promise not to fight over it. They always fought over it anyway. In that sweet, harmless way sisters do. I'd smile, wiping flour on my apron, and split the spoon right down the middle with my finger. Back then, love didn't come with receipts. It came in the form of browned edges on a pie. In mismatched mittens, I stayed up late knitting. In the way I'd tuck them in, cheeks red from the cold, bellies full of cinnamon and stories. I didn't need much. A working oven, a few borrowed recipes, a willing heart. Now when I open my windows in winter, I still swear I can smell that same cinnamon, even if it's not there, like it left an echo in the walls, a reminder of when the whole house felt full, even if our bank account wasn't. Christmas used to live in the corners of our home, and every year, I did my best to make sure it stayed. He always let me lead the way when we walked through snow. Said it was so he could keep an eye on the path, but I knew it was because he liked watching me look for the perfect tree, the kind with gaps big enough for ornaments and a top just crooked enough to make you smile. I can still feel the way he brushed pine needles off my shoulder that day. Gentle, thoughtful, like he was sweeping love off my sweater instead of tree. trimmings. His flannel smelled like wood smoke and peppermint, and his gloves were damp from carrying the tree in. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. Our quiet had always been comfortable. Like snow resting on a rooftop, soft, settled, steady. That tree didn't come from a lot with rows and price tags. It came from the woods behind Mrs. Keller's old place. We bundled up, held hands, and wandered till we found one that looked like it had been waiting for us. Inside, the house smelled like cloves and cider. The girls were still little, squealing as they ran to the window, fogging up the glass with their breath. He set the tree down near the fireplace and looked at me, grinning. "It leans a little," he said. "So do we," I told him. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, I found pine needles caught in my sweater collar. He reached over, pulled them off one by one, and kissed the back of my neck. Not rushed, not for show, just home. Sometimes I think about how quiet that moment was. No music, no cameras, just rustling newspaper, the clink of ornament hooks, and the two of us remembering that the best parts of life aren't loud. They're brushed off your shoulder when no one's looking. The house was still. Just the tick of the mantel clock and the soft whirl of snow brushing against the windows outside. I lit a small lamp, the kind with a yellow glow, and settled into my chair with the yarn in my lap. The girls had been asleep for hours. He had, too. But my hands weren't tired yet. I crocheted their stockings one by one, the thread looping through my fingers like prayers. Soft, red yarn for Katie, green for Marie. I whispered their names with every stitch, not loud, just enough to remind the yarn what it was being made for. Their feet were so small, the stockings hung like echoes from the mantel. But it didn't matter what feet inside. An orange, a peppermint stick, a note from Santa in shaky cursive I wrote with my left hand. The point wasn't the gift. It was the making, the giving. They thought that when they woke up and tiptoed down the stairs, they'd see something that wasn't there yesterday, and believe in a kind of magic that came from their mother's hands. Beside me, the tin box of buttons clicked shut. I reached for the final loop and smiled. They would love them. I just knew it. And even if they didn't, I would still love the making. Some people give what they can afford. I gave what I could feel, what I could weave in silence and warmth. That's how I learned that love doesn't need wrapping paper, just a quiet night, a soft chair, and a thread that knows where it's going. I must have pricked my thumb a dozen times making that tiny velvet dress. The fabric kept sliding, and I was too stubborn to pin it right. But I didn't care. I just wanted it to be done by morning. The dress wasn't fancy, dark red with white trim, but I stitched a little lace onto the hem and added a pearl button from my mother's sewing kit. The doll didn't care, but I did. I remember holding it up in the kitchen light, inspecting it like it was made for a runway, not a toy. My thumb was bleeding slightly. I licked it and kept going. She opened it the next morning with wide eyes, held it like it was real, like it could breathe. "You made this?" she whispered. I nodded. "With love." She didn't say anything after that, just carried it around the whole day, brushing its tiny hair and wrapping it in napkins for blankets. There's a special kind of joy in watching your child love something you made with your own hands. Not bought, not shipped, just made, flawed, careful, and filled with more hours than anyone will ever know. That night, I kissed her forehead while she slept and saw the doll tucked beside her, that crooked little dress, that pearl button. It was enough. It was more than enough, because back then, love wasn't measured in money. It was measured in how many times you were willing to prick your thumb to see someone smile. The tree leaned a little left that year. I'd meant to fix the stand, but time slipped away from me. Still, we made do. The girls strung popcorn garlands while I cut out paper snowflakes from leftover mail. We laughed every time the tree tilted, a bit farther, like it was trying to eavesdrop. "Looks like it's listening to us," Marie said. Then we better be nice, I told her. It wasn't a perfect tree. The top had a bare patch, and the bottom branches dragged on the floor. But once the lights were on and the ornaments were hung, it didn't matter. The whole room glowed. We didn't have matching bulbs or glitter bows. We had cinnamon sticks, tied with twine, flower dough shapes from last year, and pipe cleaner stars that had seen better days. But when I stepped back and looked at it, really looked, I thought it was the most beautiful tree I'd ever seen. He took my hand and squeezed. It's crooked, he said. So are we, I whispered. We stood there for a long time, just watching it sparkle. No pictures, no social media posts, just a leaning tree and a family wrapped in warm light. That was Christmas. Not flawless, not filtered, just full of us. They ask for gift cards now, send links, want barcodes and instant shipping. I try to keep up, I really do. But every time I get one of those wish lists, I feel something sink in my chest. Not because I can't afford it, but because it doesn't mean anything. It's just transactions. I sit with a half-finished scarf in my lap and wonder when we traded thoughts for convenience. When did love start coming with a receipt? I used to give what I made, a pie still warm, a poem tucked in a frame, a sweater with sleeves a little too long. Now, it's all about what's newest, fastest, trendiest. I still try. But sometimes I wonder if my trying even lands. The catalogs sit unopened on the table. My coffee's gone, cold. And in my lap, this scarf I've been knitting for weeks still has no home. No one asked for it, but I keep stitching anyway, because my hands remember. Because even if they don't see it, I do, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. It sat there under the tree, wrapped in silver paper I'd ironed smooth that morning. I'd matched the ribbon to the thread I used to stitch the border, pale blue, subtle, clean. Tucked beneath the bow was a card, handwritten, signed in the corner like I used to when I made the girls their baby blankets. I thought someone might notice. Not the card, the care. The corners were tucked just right, not a wrinkle in sight. But no one reached for it. One by one, the other gifts disappeared. Ribbons tossed on the floor, boxes opened, laughter echoing down the hallway. I sat still on the edge of the couch, watching my package grow lonelier under the branches. The quilt waited, like I did, patient, hoping. At some point, someone asked where the apple pie was. Someone else called out, "I'm heating up the ham." And just like that, the attention shifted from gifts to food. My gift still sat there, untouched, like it didn't quite match the mood of the room, like I didn't. They were all there, but I wasn't sure anyone noticed. Phones blinked in their hands. The girls took selfies with the dog wearing antlers. My grandson laughed at something on his screen and showed it to his cousin without saying a word to me. The TV played some holiday movies in the background. One of those new ones, too fast, too clean. I didn't recognize any of the actors. No one asked how my year had been. No one asked if I'd made it to the quilt fair this fall or if I was still going to the community garden. I even stopped drinking coffee a few months ago, switched to decaf because of my heart. But no one noticed. They still handed me my usual mug with the red cardinal on it, full of regular roast. I drank it anyway. I watched them laugh at videos, share jokes, and swipe past ads. All these moving images, so many screens, so little eye contact. I felt like a picture frame on the wall, familiar, maybe even comforting, but unseen, just part of the background. They saved mine for last. Maybe they thought it was sweet. A kind of grand finale. Or maybe they just forgot it was there. Either way, everyone had opened their things, boxes from Amazon, new earbuds, gift cards to restaurants they'd never go to, and there it was, still waiting. Someone said, "Oh, we've still got Grandma's." My hands trembled just slightly as they reached for it. I kept them in my lap, resting on the sweater I'd worn every Christmas since before they were born. The ribbon came off easily. The wrapping unfolded like a sigh, and there it was, my quilt, stitched, by hand, each square a piece of someone I loved. Emma's favorite book was represented by a little print of daisies. Michael's corner had a fishing pole I'd embroidered myself. I even used fabric from my old tablecloth for the border, but they didn't see any of that. They opened it, held it up halfway, let it drape across the table, and said, "Oh, wow." But not the kind of wow that sticks, the kind that slips out of your mouth when you don't know what else to say. Then came the words, soft, almost funny, adorable, in a thrift store kind of way. It was from one of the cousins. I don't think she meant anything by it. That's the thing about carelessness. It doesn't come sharp. It comes wrapped in casual, harmless ribbons. I felt the words hit anyway. My chest tightened. Not in a dramatic gasp for air kind of way. Just a small, inward folding. I looked at the quilt again. At the seams that held it together. At the corners, I'd redone twice because they didn't lay flat. At the stitching I'd done by lamplight, when my eyesight gave me trouble. They didn't ask who made it. They didn't ask what it meant. They folded it, not carefully, and placed it beside the other wrapping. Someone said, "Thanks, Grandma," as they moved on to refill their cider. No one noticed that I didn't move, that my hands had gone still in my lap, that my fingers were curled into my palms as if holding something delicate, something breaking. She didn't mean to hurt me, I believe that. But when my granddaughter, the one I once swaddled in muslin and kissed behind the ears to calm her, picked up the quilt and laughed, something in me sank. "Oh my gosh," she said, "it's totally giving Pinterest vibes." And then, as if on cue, she rolled her eyes, like what I'd made was cute but pointless, a craft, a novelty. She folded it again, this time sloppier, and passed it along. I didn't speak. I couldn't, because in that moment, my hands, the ones that had soothed her fevers, zipped her dresses, tied her shoes, felt useless, out of place. Like old tools rusting in a drawer no one opens anymore. I looked down at them. The veins are a little darker this year. The skin is looser, but still strong, still capable, still full of memories. And yet, to her, they were no longer magic. Just old. I heard it from the kitchen, a whisper, like so many things in this house. "She tries." A soft murmur, said almost kindly, as if kindness could make it better. I sat still on the couch, surrounded by ribbon tails and gift bags that hadn't been flattened. She tries, as if trying was a flaw, as if trying was something you do when you fall short. I nodded quietly, as if in agreement with something I hadn't agreed to. They didn't mean to break my heart. I know that. But intention doesn't patch silence. And sometimes, the things people don't say echo louder than the things they do. Inside, I unraveled. Not in a scene, not with tears, but in the way the thread slips loose from its needle, without sound, without asking. I sat in that almost empty room, the fire dying down, the tree lights blinking in a rhythm that no longer felt festive, and I folded my hands together like I always do when I'm trying to stay whole. No one noticed, but I did. I lay in bed, eyes tracing the pale shapes the moonlight made on the ceiling. The shadows didn't stay still, shifting like the thoughts inside me. The house was quiet now, the laughter and chatter from earlier a distant echo. But inside my chest, everything was noisy, like a choir singing out of tune. I couldn't find peace. I thought about the stitches in that quilt, the hours I spent with needle and thread, working late into the night, hands steady even when my eyes weren't. Every square had a name sewn in, a story whispered into the fabric. I hadn't just wrapped fabric, I'd wrapped pieces of myself. And now, as I lay here, I felt those pieces unraveling. The bedsheets rustled softly with every breath I took. The faint ticking of the heater was the only sound in the room besides my restless heart. I could still smell the lavender lotion I'd rubbed on before slipping beneath the covers, the scent mingling with the faint smell of cedar from the old drawers in the corner. It should have been comforting, but it only reminded me how empty the room felt. I closed my eyes and tried to push the memories away, but they kept coming. The laughter that wasn't mine, the silence that settled in afterward. I remembered my mother's hands, the way they moved with quiet grace, even though they were worn from years of work. I saw her in the kitchen of our old house, surrounded by the soft glow of an oil lamp. The snow fell gently outside, muffling the world in a blanket of white. She'd take shiny red apples, smooth and cold in her palm, and wrap each one carefully, in crinkled foil. Then she'd tuck them into the toes of thick wool socks, like little treasures waiting to be found. That was Christmas, handmade, thoughtful, simple, and beautiful in its honesty. I never saw store-bought gifts then. We didn't have much money, but we had love, and we knew it. I remember the smell of wood smoke from the stove mixing with the scent of cinnamon bread baking in the oven. The sound of her humming as she worked, blending with the wind, tapping softly against the windows. I didn't understand then how much effort it took to show love like that, but I felt it in every carefully wrapped apple. I sat up in bed, clutching the quilter's edge that lay folded on my lap. I used to believe that effort itself was a kind of love language, proof that someone cared enough to spend their time, their energy. But now, I wasn't so sure. The stitches I'd made, the hours I'd poured into every square, they didn't seem to matter anymore. I pressed my fingers into the fabric, feeling the faint bumps where thread crossed thread. My hands trembled a little, not with cold, but with doubt. Did any of it matter? Did I matter? Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, the silence around me felt like a question I couldn't answer. Outside, the moon hung high and cold in the sky, its pale light filtering through the window. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the heater and the distant drip of melting snow from the eaves. The scent of coffee wafted faintly through the vents, a reminder that morning was coming, whether I was ready or not. I padded quietly into the living room just as the dawn began to soften the blinds. The air smelled faintly of yesterday's pie and the lingering warmth of coffee cups left on the table. My bare feet touched the cold floor, and I shivered, wrapping my arms around myself. There it was, the gift bag I'd left near the tree. Beside it, the familiar Amazon box, still unopened. But the quilt? Gone. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where it had been. It was as if the air itself had swallowed my voice. No one had said a word about it. No one had mentioned its absence. The quiet in the room was heavy, pressing down on my chest. I lowered myself carefully onto the sofa, the soft creak breaking, the stillness. The quilt was gone, but I could still feel the weight of it in my hands, the stories it carried folded inside the fabric, and I felt smaller than I'd ever felt before. I sat there, staring out at the pale morning light filtering through the window, feeling not just invisible, but extinct, like a hand-sewn doily resting on a glass table that no one dusted anymore. The world had moved on, and I hadn't noticed. I wasn't sad because they forgot the quilt. I was sad because they forgot what it meant. That quilt was more than fabric and thread. It was time spent. Memories sewn into squares, names whispered into stitches. My hands folded in my lap, and my fingers absently circled my palm, as if trying to hold myself together. The faint glow of the tree lights still blinked softly, but they felt distant now, like a signal no one was turned into anymore. The air was cool and still, wrapping around me like a silent shroud. Have you ever felt this way? Like the world around you moves on while you're still standing in the same quiet place? like your efforts go unnoticed and your love is forgotten? If you've ever carried that kind of silence, I want you to know you're not alone. Tell me about it below. I'm listening. The cup sat on the small saucer beside me, steam long gone, leaving the tea lukewarm and distant. I had poured it out, of habit, the kind of habit that tries to hold on to comfort even when comfort slips away. My robe wrapped tight around my shoulders, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the weight of feeling unseen, like I could be in a room, alone and still be invisible. The fire crackled low in the background, its warmth faint against the chill settling in my bones. Outside, the light was gray, pressing against the windows like a heavy curtain. The faint scent of bergamot from the tea mixed with the wool from my robe. It should have been cozy. It should have been enough. But my heart felt hollow, an empty room with no echoes. I stared out the window at the world wrapped in white and wondered if anyone else felt as quiet as I did this morning. Snow had fallen fast overnight, thick and soft, blanketing everything in a hush. The driveway disappeared under a smooth, unbroken layer, like no one lived here anymore. The streetlights from the neighbors' porches blinked dimly into the fog, their glow swallowed by the cold air. I watched it pile higher, the world disappearing one flake at a time, and I thought maybe no one would notice if I never opened my door again. The glass was patterned with frost, spreading like icy veins that caught the weak morning light. The heater clicked on and off, filling the silence with a gentle pop. Outside, the snow muffled every sound. No cars, no footsteps, no laughter, just the steady falling of white. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting. Waiting for something I wasn't sure I could give. I wasn't crying for the quilt. I was crying because no one asked about the stories stitched into it. No one asked about my first job, the one where I spilled coffee on my skirt and laughed it off. No one asked about the scar on my wrist from the jam jar I dropped when I was a girl. They only saw Grandma. Not the girl who once danced barefoot in the rain, or the woman who survived heartbreak with a quiet smile. I had become a background character in my own life. The living room was dim under the overcast sky, the faint smell of rain-damp wood drifting in through the cracked window. My lap was covered by a thin throw, and the ticking clock on the mantel sounded louder than usual. I felt the weight of being there, but not really being seen, like a shadow cast on a wall no one looked at. I found a recipe card in my mother's drawer once. It was smudged, the corners curled and worn, the handwriting faded almost beyond recognition. I cried when I found it, even back then. Now I know why. That card was me, smeared by time, tucked away, easy to ignore. Forgotten, but still there. I wondered, who would remember my handwriting? Would anyone ever trace the letters I left behind? The wind whistled softly through the fireplace vent as snow tapped at the windows like quiet knocks. The faint scent of old paper and lemon cleaner filled the room. The ache was quiet but deep, settling into the bones like winter's chill. The word burden floated into my thoughts like a fog I couldn't shake. I remembered how carefully I double-checked everything before visiting, making sure I didn't overstay my welcome, keeping my stories brief. I tried not to take up too much space, speaking softly, shrinking myself small. But maybe, in trying to be small, I made myself invisible. The sky darkened early outside, the lamps still unlit in the quiet room. The soft clink of a spoon against a cold teacup was the only sound besides my breathing and the occasional creak of the settling house. I wondered if I had become something too small to see, too quiet to notice. It wasn't about the fabric. It wasn't even about the time spent sewing each stitch. It was that I gave something real and no one noticed. I realized I'd been doing that for years, showing up, stitching love into silence, and somehow I'd disappeared right in front of them. The night had fully settled now, the living room lit only by the soft glow of holiday lights. The tea I'd poured sat untouched in the sink, and the snow outside continued to fall steady and quiet, covering everything in a blanket of forgetfulness. It was so small, I almost missed it. A thin strand of fabric slipping free from my sewing basket, resting gently on the carpet like a secret whispered just for me. I hadn't even noticed it had fallen, but my old dog did. He sniffed at it carefully, his nose twitching, as if he knew it carried something more than thread, a memory, a feeling. Sometimes love finds the smallest things first, the things we overlook in our hurry or sadness. That tiny thread felt like a quiet invitation, a soft nudge that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The morning sun filtered softly through the snow-brightened windows, casting gentle light across the room. The furnace hummed quietly in the distance, wrapping the house in warmth. My fabric basket sat beside my chair, spilling threads and scraps like stories waiting to be told. Near my slipper, the thread lay still, waiting for my hands to notice. The air was still, curious, soft, a pause in the middle of a long, heavy winter. He never used to do this. My old boy has always been a little aloof. Loyal, yes, but not the cuddly kind. He kept his distance, a silent guardian more than a lap. Companion. But this morning was different. He sniffed that scrap of cloth with interest, circled it once, then settled his graying muzzle right on top of it, like it meant something precious. Like I meant something. It was a small act, but it felt like a warm hand reaching out across the years. The sun had begun to peek around the corner, warming the windowsill where he curled up. The faint scent of wool and pine drifted in from the porch. The silence in. The room was no longer heavy. It was calm, gentle, filled with quiet understanding. For a moment, I felt seen, not by the world, but by the simplest friend I had. I reached for the drawer and pulled out a folded keepsake, a baby blanket I'd stitched long ago. Her name was embroidered in lavender thread, delicate and hopeful. My granddaughter, pink and perfect, wrapped in something made with more hope than sleep. I remembered the night I finished it, my fingers trembling with joy and tiredness, the soft hum of the sewing machine mixing with my breath. I still have it, tucked away safe and warm. Suddenly, that memory wrapped me instead. It filled the room with something I thought I'd lost, a sense of purpose, of love that lasts beyond words. The living room glowed softly, the fading afternoon light mingling with the gentle breathing of my dog beside me. I leaned back in my chair, the fabric basket resting nearby, the tea reheated and warm in my hands. Outside, the wind chimes tinkled faintly as the snow softened, melting slowly in the quiet. It wasn't about one gift. It never was. It was about every quiet act, the warm meals made without thanks, the whispered bedtime songs no one applauded. I've been telling stories without words for decades, and even if no one listens, I remember them all. Not every story needs an audience. Not every memory needs to be passed down or shared. Some stories can stay folded inside me, quiet, warm, enough. I looked down at my dog, still curled there, resting his head against my palm. I smiled, a real one this time, slow and steady. Peace settled in the room, a bright hush touching everything. The sunlight hit the thread just so, and I felt, for the first time in a while, that some things are just mine to keep. The sky was a heavy gray, the kind of day that makes the world feel quieter, slower. I clutched the pie tin in my hands, the warm scent of apple and clove rising up in little clouds every time I breathed out. The crust was golden, flaky, my way of saying I'm still here, still trying. I told myself I was just dropping off a pie, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was a key, a way to open a door I hadn't crossed in too long. The cold air settled on my coat, dusting it with soft snowflakes as I stepped onto the porch, the house humming with faint voices inside and decorations. hanging forgotten from last Christmas. The garage door creaked open slowly. The concrete floor was cold beneath my feet, the air stale and sharp with the smell of plastic and motor oil. There, folded clumsily beside a box fan and a bag labeled "Donate," lay my quilt. The edges weren't neat, just tossed like an afterthought. I stood there longer than I should have, hands clenched, heart tight. So this is where love goes when it's too much trouble, I thought quietly. The distant laughter from inside the house felt miles away. No one saw me take it. No one stopped me. I folded it gently, cradling it like a child I hadn't held in years. I walked out of that cold garage as if the quilt was mine, because it was. Not just the fabric or the thread, but the story and the intention stitched into every square. The part of me they never bothered to unwrap. 2 days later at dinner, my son asked softly, "Did you take that back?" I looked up from my soup, spoon halfway to my mouth, and smiled. "I figured you had enough store-bought warmth. This one's not for donation." He blinked, silent for a moment. I took a slow sip of my soup. That was all. That evening, I pulled out my sewing basket and chose fabric I'd saved for something special. Threading my needle, I worked not from hurt, but from clarity. Every square I added felt like reclaiming my voice. This time, I stitched a small tag inside, a quiet truth they'd never see. Love isn't owned, it's offered. The room was soft with evening light, the radio playing low jazz, the needle clicking steadily through layers of quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't write a letter or slam a door. I simply remembered who I was. I gave love not to be thanked, but to be known. And if they didn't want it, that was their missing piece, not mine. Night had fully settled, the quilt folded neatly in my lap. My dog snored softly at my feet. Outside, the world was blanketed in fresh snow. Calm settled inside me, a quiet dignity that didn't need to make a sound. The first time I brought a quilt to the shelter, I wasn't sure what to expect. I carried it carefully, folding it with the same tenderness I had used all those years ago. When I handed it to a young woman wrapped in a threadbare coat, she didn't ask what it was made of or where it came from. She just held it close, as if she'd been cold her whole life. Tears welled in her eyes, and suddenly, I was crying too. Not from sadness, but from recognition. From knowing that the warmth in those stitches meant more than just fabric. It meant hope. It meant comfort. The shelter lobby hummed softly with voices and footsteps. The smell of brewed coffee mingled with fabric softener, and cardboard boxes of folded linens lined the walls. Outside, the sky was gray, trying to let a little light through the clouds. It was a small moment, but one that told me I'd found a new kind of home for the love I had to give. I started piecing together old scraps, flannel shirts from years. Past, faded baby blankets, and even a hem from my wedding dress. Each piece carried a breath, a story, a soft edge of time that no one else might remember but me. I stitched while humming songs Mama used to sing when I was a child. Those quiet lullabies filled the room and mingled with the hum of my sewing machine and the birdsong outside the window. These weren't just donations to me. They were stories wrapped in warmth, quiet pieces of my life given a new purpose. The cozy sewing nook was lit by a warm lamp, its soft glow chasing away the chill outside. The scent of fresh laundry and honey-sweetened tea filled the air. With every stitch, I felt a little more whole. I used to pause while sewing, hoping for someone to say thank you. Just a small word or smile that meant my effort had been seen. Now, I sew without expectation. The quiet freedom is better than applause. I don't need thanks. I see it in the way the women pull the quilts up around their chins, in the warmth that settles in their shoulders. That is thanks enough for me. The evening room is dim, golden lamplight bathing the walls in softness. One quilt drapes the armchair, inviting and comforting. The scent of chamomile tea lingers like a gentle heartbeat. In that moment, I understand that sometimes the best gratitude is silent. And enough. I made one more quilt. Just one. From the oldest, brightest pieces, those too full of meaning to give away. I stitched my name into the corner, my maiden name, like a quiet signature, not for pride, but for presence. To remind myself, I was here. I mattered. The house was quiet, lit only by the low glow of the fireplace. The quilt lay spread across my lap, warmed by my own body. The air held the faint scent of cedar and thread, a reminder of all the love woven into every fiber. In that stillness, I found peace. They may not remember the gift. They may not remember the hands that made it, but I remember, and that is enough. I've learned that some stories don't need to be told out loud to be real. They live in the things we make, the love we leave behind. Outside, dawn is breaking, soft pink light brushing the snow. My dog curls at my feet, and the quilt is folded neatly at the end of the bed. Still, grateful, whole. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. If you've ever stitched your heart into something, only to have it overlooked, please know you're not the only one. And if you're 50 or older, I'd love to know your age and where you're listening from. Just drop it in the comments. So we can find each other. And if my stories bring you a little comfort, a little company, subscribe for more of Grandma's tales. I'll be right here. Always.